Tiffany Cloud. Welcome to The Storm, and thank you for watching today on WYLN 35. Sexual violence, it can take on many forms. Sexual harassment, sexual abuse of seniors, teens, of children, members of the LGBT community, men, women, and so on. Today I'm joined by the Honorable Jack Panella, who sits on the Pennsylvania Superior Court, and he's written the Pennsylvania Sexual Violence Bench Book. He's going to discuss this most serious issue with me, so stick around. We'll be right back on The Storm, only on WYLN 35. The Storm. Today I am joined by the Honorable Jack Panella. He sits on the Pennsylvania Superior Court, and he has written several books. One of them is the Pennsylvania Sexual Violence Bench Book, which was published in December of 2007. Your Honor, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh no, thank you very much for asking me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. It's an important topic. It's a serious topic. It's a broad topic. There's going to be a lot to cover. Before we cover anything, though, I just have to give a shout out to the Honorable Coriel Stevens, who made the introduction of you and me and gave me the opportunity to interview you today. So, Your Honor, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out where to start, but first I just want to explain to the audience that the Pennsylvania Sexual Violence Bench Book, it provides a comprehensive understanding of Pennsylvania's sexual offense laws, and it's a resource for judges who are dealing with various sexual crimes.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What would lead you to decide that this is an area that you really want to write about? Was it a particular case you handled, series of cases? What was the motivation?
Well, it was actually a request by the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. Back in 2006, the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape qualified for federal funds for the drafting of a bench book on this topic. There's only one other bench book in the country. Well, there was only one other at the time in Michigan. And they were able to receive this grant. The monies were funneled through the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And believe it or not, one of my former law clerks, one of the most wonderful things about being a judge is you get to work with great lawyers. And one of my former law clerks at the time was working with them. And she recommended me. They were looking for a judge to be the author of a bench book such as this. And they talked to me, they interviewed me, and they offered me the possibility of writing the book.
How long would an undertaking of this magnitude take?
Okay, the first edition took 2.5 years.
Okay, I would imagine it would be a
Yes.
long time. Okay.
Yes. And the two more recent editions, because we're up to the third edition now, they took about a year to prepare.
Okay, and as I did my open of the show, the topic of sexual violence is so broad that I can't even imagine how you put it into a book. I mean, there are so many different areas that it covers. So sexual harassment is under it, I would imagine, abuse, rape, there's violence against children, crimes against members of the LGBT community, women, men, etc. I almost don't know where to begin with my first question to you, other than for you to perhaps outline the scope and the magnitude of the issue. So we'll just start with that. If you could give us a broad outline.
Well, your comments are so on point, because sometimes, I go to conferences about the issue of sexual violence, and people say we're working towards a country to be sexually violent free. And you know what? As long as we have doors and as long as we have shades over windows, there will always be sexual violence. What people do in private sometimes is shocking. So the problem, I don't think, will ever go away. The one thing I think we could calm some of your viewers down is that there really is no increase in it, but there is an increase in the reporting.
Okay.
As more information has been put out there, more and more victims are now willing to come forward. This is not an easy crime for a victim to report, especially when the perpetrator is a member of the family. And we're seeing many more reports now also on our college campuses. So although it seems like we have so many more cases of sexual violence today, I think statistics which are compiled by the FBI and our federal government show that no, that they don't think that there's any more episodes of it, but it's just that more victims are now willing to come forward.
Which is good, and it may be a generational thing as well. I mean, back in my grandparents' generation, you know, people tend to keep things more hush-hush when they happened in the home, no matter what the activities were. There was just a generational dynamic. I'm glad that that is something that people have become more comfortable discussing.
And there is a lot of education on that out there now, teaching children, really sometimes at the elementary school level, but definitely in high school, definitely a lot of programs on college campuses encouraging people to come forward. And there's now not that, cloak of secrecy when it's a member of the family. The victims are willing to come forward and talk about it.
So how did you set up or organize the book? I mean, how did you lay out the structure of it?
Well, what we did was we approached the book with the idea that some judges are elected to the bench who do not have a lot of courtroom experience. They've done other things. They've had an office practice, say a real estate practice. They've primarily maybe practiced civil law, and they don't have a lot of experience in criminal law. So we designed the book for a judge without any type of experience in a criminal case, especially a case involving sexual violence. And we did the case chronologically from the moment charges are filed up until the appeal period. And we took a judge step by step through the book. A bench book is different from other books. A bench book is supposed to be a reference that a judge can use on the bench. Nothing's worse in a courtroom. If you're ever in a courtroom, and you have to understand the dynamics of a courtroom, sometimes an objection is made, and the way the judge rules on that objection could change the course of the entire trial. And the jury is listening passionately to the evidence. The last thing anybody wants to do is take a 1 or a 2 hour break because the judge is not sure of the response to give and go to the law library. Now it would be go on the computer. So the bench book is designed to give a judge a very fast, a very quick reference to all these important issues that could develop during this trial.
So is it almost, I mean, not to minimize, but is it almost like a Cliff Notes version of all of the laws?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's just what it is. It condenses everything and in chronological order. And an important part of the book also is that a lot of important topics are repeated. Because if a judge, say, needs an answer on, say, the admissibility of testimony of the complaining witness, well, that might be addressed in a number of different parts of the book. So if the judge gets to one part, the judge will get the answer quickly. Doesn't have to now rifle through a whole bunch of other pages.
And you haven't just written one book, because clearly, we're not an underachiever here. You decided to write more than one book. So tell me what else you've written.
Well, we should be very proud here in Pennsylvania. We are the only state with a bench book for the minor judiciary, magisterial district court judges. And I shouldn't use that word minor because they play a very important role in the system.
But it's different than the Court of Common Pleas.
And they make some very important decisions in cases like this, because often that's the first time the victim and the defendant are seeing each other since the criminal episode. And to give you an example, this case came out of my own county. Just recently, we had a case in which it was a rape case. If my memory serves me correct, the alleged defendant was a teacher. And the victim was very traumatized by the episode and didn't want to appear at the preliminary hearing. And the district attorney wanted to protect the victim up until the time of trial. And of course, hearsay is admissible. Well, the MDJ, not being familiar with some of the rules in these type of cases, would not preside over the preliminary hearing without the victim being there. And what happened was the district attorney got involved, the president judge got involved, and the problem was corrected. And that's why we all felt a book is also important at the MDJ level.
Absolutely makes a lot of sense. And one of the things we want to talk about in the next break, because we're about to go to commercial, is you talk about the victim and coming to court. And we're going to spend some time talking about that journey to getting to court, because it's not an easy journey, as you and I were talking about before we rolled tape today. So we're going to pick up with that. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. I am joined today by the Honorable Jack Panella. He's a Pennsylvania Superior Court judge, and he wrote the Pennsylvania Sexual Violence Bench Book, which was published in 2007, among several books that he's written. So before the break, I said I want to talk in this segment about the journey to court and the process of the victim of a crime, whether sexual violence, harassment, what have you, deciding to make that move, that journey. It's not an easy journey, is it, Your Honor?
No, it's not at all. And they need a good support system out there of family members and friends to really get through this.
Okay. So let's say a person is unfortunately a victim of rape. We'll take that instance. I mean, obviously one of the first things that they have to do as part of the journey is go and get a full medical exam and have to go through the intrusive nature of that with a stranger. They have to go through the intimidating process of reporting to the police, etc., all of that before they get to court. Then they get to court, and sadly, so often it seems as though they are re-victimized because the defense counsel is trying to make, their job is to defend the accused. And so they often try to flip it and make the victim seem as though they somehow brought this on or are fabricating or exaggerating. As a judge, how do you deal with a situation where it seems like a potential victim, an alleged victim, I don't know if that's the right legal word, is being re-victimized in your courtroom? Well,
regrettably, it does happen time and time again. And I think it's because of that sensitive nature of these type of cases that AOPC, that's the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, wanted a bench book for these types of cases. And the reason they're more sensitive than others is that typically the only evidence the prosecutor has is the testimony of the alleged victim. And typically the only defense the defendant has is his, and I'm going to say him because 99% of the defendants are male, is his own testimony. Who does the jury believe? So unfortunately, a major point of the defense will be attacking the credibility of the complaining witness.
Because it's just their word so often that you're going on.
Yes, and the prosecutors and the police will do their best to gather corroborating evidence. They'll take body samples, fluid samples. They'll try their best to match DNA samples. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And some jurisdictions also have more money to spend on that type of preparation work than others. So it's not always present in a case. And we live in a world of CSI. Everybody watches TV and they always think in every case when they're called as a juror, they're going to see all this wonderful scientific evidence which is going to wrap the case up for them. Well, these cases, that doesn't really happen in the real world. We don't live in the CSI arena. We live in the real world arena. And so they don't see that, and they have to sit back and decide who is telling the truth. So a lot of defenses are based upon attacking the credibility of the complaining witness, of the alleged victim.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons so many alleged victims are afraid to go pursue it in the first place, because they don't want to have to sit there in a courtroom and relive what they went through.
No question about it. And also, a lot of people don't understand that often victims cannot remember the episode, because that's just the way the human brain works. The trauma, and some are blocking, but others actually organically cannot remember. It's the way the cortex of the brain works. When a traumatic episode happens, the information is not funneled the way typical information is, because typically we observe something or we see something and it sort of goes into an index that categorizes it, and then our brain puts it away so we can easily recollect it later. But a rape victim, a victim of sexual violence, the brain doesn't work that way. It goes right to where the information is stored. And often major portions are forgotten or put aside.
It's probably a survival mechanism.
It's
biological.
Yes.
A natural biological
it's
survival.
Fragmented. It's not always in chronological order. So defense attorneys will try to make hay out of a victim not testifying freely and flowly through the episode. And they can't, because they just cannot do it. They're doing their best, and they're not blocking. They just cannot remember the episode as clearly as a juror really expects them to remember it.
You wrote the Pennsylvania Sexual Violence Bench book in December of 2007, and I was driving in today. My cell phone went off, and it made me think of this question, which is, when you wrote this book, the use of cell phone technology was less than it is now. Definitely the use of social media and Facebook and texting is not as commonplace as it is now. So I would imagine that some of the evidence that's brought to court, some of the forms of harassment that you may see now, particularly the whole online internet phenomenon, you're seeing more of that, but yet you probably didn't write as much about that back then, or did you?
No, actually, in the first edition of the book, we didn't even have a section on sexting, texting pictures of people in indecent positions.
Yes.
Now, of course, we address it in the 2015, the third edition of the book, so we didn't even have that back then.
And I would imagine that's quite a phenomenon that you see a lot, including with schools, with young people, with kids. I mean, it's unfortunate, but kids take their cell phones and they take pictures of people. I mean, they're doing things, and sometimes they don't even realize they're committing a crime, unfortunately. But sometimes they knowingly do this. And
well, a message we really do try to get out is never let someone get hold of a provocative picture of you. Once it gets on someone's cell phone, the universe will have it. It gets spread so quickly, it's unbelievable. And also, studies have shown that defendants in these type of cases, and I'm talking about people who commit these crimes, not someone who is unjustly accused, but they're braggarts, and they talk about it, and they send text messages out about it. They leave phone messages about it. They email people about it. So often law enforcement will look, again, for corroborating evidence to see if they can get admissions by the defendant, by the accused of the act itself.
Well, a lot of people naively think, oh, if I just hit delete. I mean, we're seeing that at all levels of government these days, but if I just hit delete, it's gone. Well, it's not gone. It's not gone. I mean, a lot of these text messages can be retrieved and used against people in court.
And that's a very sad part about child pornography. A lot of these very deviant people think they view it and then they just delete it, and of course we know it's still on your hard drive, and the federal government and the Pennsylvania State Police are great at retrieving that. And a message we're trying to get out there is, don't think just because you download it and look at it that you haven't injured anyone, because they always say, look, I didn't hurt anybody, all I did was look at this. Well, that child would not have been victimized if people like you weren't out there willing to download it and look at it.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So always very proud of judges who take those type of cases very seriously. And often you'll see substantial sentences.
As we should.
Yes.
Yes. So, and with that, we're going to take another break. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. Your Honor, before we talk about the next subject, I just want you to share with the audience where, if they want to look at the book that we've been discussing, where they can find it.
The book is actually available online on two different websites, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania's website, and as well as the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape's website. So both websites have full copies of the books.
Okay, so it's not like you just have to be a judge to be able to read this.
That's correct.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. The thing that I asked you when we were at the last break was sort of what's the next, I don't want to say hot area, but area that you're really pursuing. And you had shared with me what's happening on college campuses. So I'd like you to talk about that to the audience.
Yeah, recently, meaning the last couple of years, a lot of attention has turned to college campuses, and a lot of psychologists are doing studies on college campuses. We're seeing more and more cases reported, and like I said earlier, everyone shouldn't be alarmed. Statistics show that it's not happening any more often, but just more victims are willing to come forward. So a lot of people are directing their attention as to how to resolve this problem, because that is a bit more of a controlled environment, and there is something we can accomplish on our college campuses. So a lot of attention is going there right now.
You know, it's interesting to me because I've always read, and I know I'm simplifying, but I've always read that those who perpetrate crimes of sexual violence, it tends to be more about control than it is necessarily about sex, and Yet in college campuses, is it about control?
No, I don't think so. I think the opposite would be true from what I've read on college campuses.
Okay.
It's more about
just saying, yay, look what I did.
Right. And we always have to say, you know, alleged perpetrators, because regrettably innocent people do get charged sometimes, and sometimes horrible things then happen after that to their careers. But I do think it's different on college campuses. I think it is the fact that they want the sexual relations, not the control or the power of it.
And do you find that typically, I would imagine the answer is yes, but would you find that typically on college campuses that there is a strong correlation between alcohol and various events?
Oh, the studies definitely show that, and they show the abuse of alcohol actually being promoted by the abusers to the victims to get the victims to be compliant.
Interesting. So the big lesson out there to people and to young people, and I know, listen, we were all young, we've all had our fun, but really, you know, if you don't have your faculties, you know, you are vulnerable.
We wrote an op-ed column, actually I did, in the Eastern Express Times not too long ago. It was after that episode was revealed at Penn State. And I consulted with people from the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, and they actually gave me some suggestions, because I was trying to inform parents, teach your children not to get into these predicaments, to avoid it. And their response to me was, go directly to the students, because often they won't, you know, at that age you don't listen to your parents. So they said, try to send the message directly to the college-age student rather than send it through the parents. And I think it was a good lesson.
Well, Your Honor, we're unfortunately out of time, but I have to tell you, it's really been a pleasure to have you on the show, and I think that the work that you've done is so important, and I am sure it is very rewarding. And so thank you so much for being here, and please know that you're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you very much. It was indeed a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And remember, folks, when you look around and don't like what you see, don't complain about it. You can do something about it. Thank you for watching.